everybody, and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. We are going to be breaking down one of the most important updates as we're getting closer and closer to this Bitcoin halving. Less than 4 days away before we actually have this next Bitcoin halving. This will be the fourth one in all of the cycles, and every single time we have one of these, the price skyrockets into a new all-time high. We're going to be breaking down the charts, sharing with you guys the prior halvings, what the price has done, what to expect with the halving currently as we're getting closer and closer to that point. And as we're mapping out Bitcoin, I'm going to make sure that you guys know exactly how to play this market so that we can make the most money possible over the course of these runs. Now guys, we are less than 4 days away before this Bitcoin halving, and for those that don't really understand what the Bitcoin halving is, every single 4 years, the amount of new Bitcoins that are created, the supply that is actually added into the ecosystem based off the mining rewards, gets cut in half every 4 years. So we're currently sitting at 6.25 Bitcoin per block mined. So this number is going to half once again, and this is really what drives the prices. In November 28th of 2012, the mining reward was actually 50 Bitcoin, and then in that first halving, it dropped to 25 Bitcoin. The second halving was in 2016. It dropped from 25 Bitcoin to 12.5, and now it's just continuously been dropping, currently sitting at 6.25, but we're about to half once more. So instead of 6.25, we're going to be dropping into the threes next. As we're looking at this, it's important that we're looking at the entire price history because this is a pattern that has played out each and every one of our cycles, and it has varied to some extent, but oftentimes we've seen these halvings behave very similarly, where in the first cycle, this was our very first Bitcoin halving right over here, November 28th of 2012. We can see that we had just started our first higher highs and higher lows of the new trend, kind of building our first support base, and we were right around those prior all-time highs once the halving kicks in, and then from there we see the price absolutely skyrocket into new all-time highs. Now the same thing happened in 2016, and this was actually when I first got into Bitcoin. I bought my first Bitcoin right before that Bitcoin halving at $450, and then when the Bitcoin market actually pumped, that was my first experience of profit in the crypto markets. And so it was in this time that I started to get a more deeper understanding of crypto, the halvings, how all of that stuff works, and we can see that this was the first halving in which the price actually dropped shortly after. We actually saw another 25% sell-off that took place right after. But we can see that, once again, the halving is right here. We're pretty much right around those prior all-time highs. And then after the halving, we see the price kind of skyrocket into new all-time highs. Now, even coming into our most recent cycle that we went through, what we saw in the last cycle was we had the COVID crash, right? We saw this big capitulation take place right before our halving, and we basically rebounded right back to the same levels right before that crash actually took place, leading into our halving. So at our halving, we had reclaimed our prior trend. We had finally reclaimed the entire dip of the COVID crash, and then that was where we got our next Bitcoin halving. And we can see that the price also ended up following, the same sort of path it's always taken. We can see today that as we're getting closer and closer to this next halving, we're at a little bit of a different point in market structure, but it's not that big of a difference, right? The only difference I would argue is that we're currently sitting at a higher price point. We already made a new all-time high, and this is the first time in which Bitcoin has made a new all-time high before the halving has taken place, because we can come all the way back and look at these cycles. We were below the all-time high here. In fact, if we just draw a line, make it a little bit easier for you guys to see, we were still quite a bit below that prior all-time high. We hadn't even retested it into our first halving. Then we can come over here in 2016, we can see kind of the same sort of thing where we started uptrending, right? Higher highs and higher lows, but we were still kind of, still below those prior all-time highs, somewhere right around the mid-cycle point before that halving took place. Even into our most recent cycle that we just went through, it was more a lot of the same sort of things where we're kind of sitting at this mid-range cycle point right at the halving, and then the price starts to break out. So where I see us today is obviously a little bit of a different point. The market's been much more bullish than any of the prior cycles. I think obviously fueled because there's way more demand, there's way more confidence in Bitcoin and crypto than there ever has been. There's ways for big money players to actually participate in the markets. Now with the approval of the ETFs, I don't really think that there's anything much more that needs to happen for crypto to see mainstream adoption. We already have all the on-ramps, the institutions are here. The only thing we're really lacking is the retail adoption, which I think is about to be coming in. Historically speaking, right at the halving is, generally when the retail adoption starts to kick off. Maybe there's a couple months of consolidation after the halving, but historically speaking, the halving happens and then we see the real price action start to take off into new all-time highs. So when I'm seeing the market, we've already been much more bullish. The dips have been pretty short-lived. Any corrections that we've had haven't really lasted very long, and the market has just been uptrending much quicker in pace than any of the prior bull runs. So as we're currently sitting at these prior all-time highs, getting this short-term dip in here around the World War III rumors and whatnot, It's currently a lot of FUD. I just happen to think that as we're sitting, 3 days, approximately a little over 3 days until this next Bitcoin halving, and as we're experiencing this little correction in here on the shorter time frames, to me, this is a really great buying opportunity because most likely we're going to see another shakeout here. We'll probably see one more big flush, and that could be the great opportunity of getting in on a dip right before that Bitcoin halving. Because the way I'm looking at Bitcoin currently, I look at this as just your standard ABC correction, and we're currently just finishing out this wave C. And in every single wave C, you have 5 impulse waves. We finished wave 1, wave 2, we finished wave 3, wave 4, and I believe we're currently inside our final decline that we're going to experience before this reversal takes place. So the fact is, guys, historically speaking, there's only been one other time that Bitcoin's been in a dip, I guess you could say, at the halving. In this last cycle, we were just kind of in this sideways consolidation, but we had already regained the COVID crash at that point. So we weren't really seeing any sort of dip. We just regained a dip going into that halving. And then if we come all the way back in 2016, this was really the only time in which we had the halving, and then it had this big dip right after. But we've never really seen the market just correcting and at the bottom of a correction leading into the halving. And I really won't be surprised to see that being the case this time around. As we're seeing this big dip after, a pretty sustained move off of the lows, basically ever since September of 2023, we've seen this big breakout, not really any pullbacks. So this is the first pullback that we're experiencing. I find it likely that this is going to end up getting bought up really quickly, especially when this news comes out around the Bitcoin halving. Don't be surprised if all of a sudden the news outlets, mainstream news, starts talking about Bitcoin's halving, starts actually talking about it, informing the public, saying, showing the charts, showing how the markets have actually moved after the halving, and maybe going into details around these supply shocks. I wouldn't be surprised to see institutions actually making articles about this, posting them, because we're at the awareness phase of the cycle, right? Historically speaking, when we look at Bitcoin, every halving we've ever had, we end up seeing the price skyrocket shortly after. I find it likely that because the price has already been outperforming so much quicker in comparison with the prior cycles, I find it likely that this is only going to continue to fuel more adoption long term. This is another narrative that's going to drive the price in the same ways that it's always driven the price in the prior cycles. So now that we've actually seen arguably the most impulsive cycle up to this point, I don't think that we should be fading this. In fact, I think that this is a remarkable buy opportunity that, I wasn't necessarily knowing if we were going to get. I was, hoping we'd get a correction. I love to see the corrections because that means I can get back into the market. I can compound some of the gains that I've been making on the way up. And to me, that's really where the value is. Now, with us not really having any sort of major correction, I was starting to get skeptical about, is Bitcoin just going to front run and go into this massive new all-time high? So now that we're actually getting this correction, it's encouraging to me because I wanted to see a short-term dip that I could jump back into, that we could kind of, adjust the market, reset a little bit, get some more money into it before we make that next leg up. So I do think that we're going to see one more leg down, but that leg down coinciding so perfectly with this Bitcoin halving, to me, it's going to get bought up. It's really just an opportunity to get in at a lower price before we get that next breakout into new all-time highs. Where I think that we go next out of this breakout, whenever we bottom, is basically 90 and 100K. Now that we're getting this correction, overall, I think that we're going to see some pretty decent sized breakouts coming very soon. And this is really where the fun part of the cycle begins. We've never really been this high up in the market structure leading into a halving. And to me, it's really fueled by how much demand we have this cycle. We have more institutional value than ever before. They're accumulating billions and billions of dollars every single day. They've kind of slowed down the last few days, but I have nothing but confidence that this cycle is going to be fueled much more, I guess you could say it's going to be much more retail driven, a lot more institutional driven. There's going to be more hype than we've ever seen. And a lot of that is just because we're at a point in the cycle where we have true adoption. We've never really had true adoption. Now that the institutions are here, I've got nothing but confidence that they're going to look to take some profits. And we want to just simply do our part by being prepared for that. Any sort of correction is an opportunity to get in at a lower price. Currently, the market is looking a little weak, but, like I said, guys, I really only think that we've got one more little lower low coming, and from there, that will be where we get that big reversal. So just be aware of that. Just be prepared. Look at this as an opportunity to get in. Don't be shaken out. I for sure wouldn't be panic selling anything right now. Even if you bought yesterday and you're starting to see the markets dip a little bit lower again today, it's not a bad thing, guys. Dollar cost averaging doesn't mean you're always going to buy the exact low or the local bottom. Chances are you're going to buy a bottom and then it's going to dip a little bit more and you're going to kind of have to keep averaging into that position. And that's just completely normal. The fact is we've seen such a much bigger cycle up to this point, much more parabolic. And I think that any dip we get should be our opportunity to jump in, knowing that, hey, the cycle's already more bullish. There's already more buy support than we've ever seen. because of that, you know, any dip we get, we want to go in. We want to go in heavy. It doesn't matter if we're not getting the exact bottom, because when this thing breaks out, the upside potential is going to just be so much bigger than any sort of potential downside that you're going to see. So I just think that we should focus on the bigger picture, knowing that this cycle's outperforming, knowing what has happened in years past leading into a Bitcoin halving, and how impulsive the markets have gotten. I've got a lot of confidence that we're about to make a lot of money, and I just wanted to help calm some of your guys' nerves, questions, comments, and concerns around this dip, because I've got a lot of confidence we're all about to make an absolute killing over the rest of this year. So guys, if you found value in this, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. For you guys that do want to actually see how I'm investing, any altcoins I'm buying, selling, trading inside of this dip, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up for my VIP program. Make sure you guys go ahead in the description of this video, find my website. There you're going to get total access to all of my private signals I'm posting, anything I'm doing with my money over the course of these cycles. I post it in my Discord server, so if you guys want access, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up for my website. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. As always, peace out.